Okay guys, today we are gonna continue with functions. We're gonna do a little bit of recap and also speak about the arrow functions, and also I want us to have a little bit more in-depth look of functions, how they operate. So the arrow function. Now, the arrow function is something that you will probably remember from C#. It's something quite new in the development world. It's something that has been implemented in most languages or APIs in some shape or form. And in JavaScript and C#, you'll notice that they're very similar. But of course, JavaScript has quite a different the way it operates regarding certain functionalities. Even though it does look the same as C#, it functions a little bit differently. So an arrow function is an expression and is a compact alternative to a traditional function expression, but is limited and can't be used in all situations. Now, the arrow function is something that you guys will get familiar with, and the more, how can I say, skilled you get with using JavaScript and the more experience you gain as you work with it. If you look in the documentation, you'll notice that there's a list of differences and limitations. So basically what these differences and limitations mean is that the arrow function is mainly used for a simple and quick use of a function. You can create an arrow function with a body that has a little bit more complex functionalities or expressions in them. But also you can also just use an arrow function as a single line function that can do something really, really quickly. It kind of depends on how you want to use it and where you want to use it, how the functionality will work, and how complex this specific expression will be for you. But let's just quickly show you guys what the syntax will look like and how it will operate. So the normal or the base syntax for the arrow function is quite straightforward actually. It's simply a parameter, right, that you will have in a normal function. So let's say, for instance, we have a function test, then we will have inside of our brackets, we will have the parameters, right? Now, the parameter is inside of an arrow function will look a little bit differently, and also the way we use the arrow function will also need to be used very precisely. So just to quickly show you the syntax, right? The parameter will be the first thing that you have, right? And then you will have what we call the equal sign and an arrow. This is the sign or the syntax for how we would use an arrow function. It's simply an equal sign and then the greater than sign next to it, which means it's pointing towards a function that needs to be assigned in the correct manner. And then after we have our equals greater than signs, we will have our expression or expressions that will be executed when the arrow function gets called, right? Now, one important thing we need to note is that the arrow function does not function as a normal method or function inside of JavaScript. And what I mean by that is that it's not something we can create or define inside of our script and then call later on when we want to use it again. It's something that has like a single use in a specific place where you use it, right? So if I can show it to you guys quickly, we will, let's say for instance, I am going to say, let's say console.log, and then in here we can create an arrow function that does something really, really quickly. So for instance, we can say test arrow, and then we give our sign. And then in here, we will give a syntax. So let's say, for instance, I have created a variable called number, and I assign value 10 to it. Now, what we can do in this arrow function is to simply say number plus 5, for instance, right? Now, this will equate to a normal function or a function expression, but we call it an arrow function simply because of the fact that we use the equals and the greater than sign to specify the expression that needs to be executed, right? So now if we execute this, let me just save that. Unexpected strict mode reserved. That's probably because of the function. There we go. Okay. Now, one thing I want you to note is the fact that when we use the arrow function, what's happened here is that we've created the function itself, okay? So if you have a look at the syntax for the console.log that we have, right? We have the parameter of the function or the arrow function. The arrow function's signs to specify that we are using or working with an arrow function. Then we have our expression to execute. Now, inside of the console of our browser here, you'll notice that it literally is just posting the function itself, right? So it's actually stating exactly what we've written here inside of our console.log. The reason being is that this is only a function expression, but it's not saving this data to any specific value. So for us to actually see the result of this function, we will need to save it inside of some sort of a variable. So I'll create a new variable here. I'll name it test value, and I won't assign a value to it. And then what I'm going to do inside of the console.log, I am going to assign a value to it. So I'm going to say test value equals our arrow function. Right. So now the problem, that's only because we're using it in a console log. So let me do it like this instead. There we go. All right. So what's happening here, this function specifically here, or the variable that we've assigned or created, we have assigned a specific arrow function value to it. Now what's going to happen here is that this arrow function will execute its expression, save it, and then assign it equal to our test value here. So if we then say test value like so, there we go, there we go. So the reason it was posting the function itself again is simply because when we assign an arrow function in this manner, we have to remember that this test arrow keyword that we've used here is supposed to be the parameter. That means that when we are trying to call this value or get this value, we need to say that there is a parameter that needs to get. You'll also notice that the IntelliSense of the VS Code automatically pops up to show what exactly is going to happen here. It says that it is a numeric expression and returns a natural logarithm of a number. The reason it's saying that is because we're doing a normal math calculation here, getting a number and then adding it to it. So for us to actually see the end result of this arrow function, we also need to specify that there has to be a parameter. So even if we do add any value to this parameter, whether it be a string value or an empty value, doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is we need to use this the same way we call a function, right? We have to specify the two brackets, and inside of it we can leave it empty or not, it doesn't matter, but we need to have that in order to see the actual results. Otherwise, if we just leave it like this, we won't get the value of this variable. It's just going to print out the actual value that it has there. So it's not actually executing this arrow function unless we do have our two brackets like so. So now if we then refresh, you'll notice that we get a value out of our expression here. Now, like I said, because this test arrow is a value, we can technically, instead of using +5, we can say test arrow plus equals our number, like so. Now what's going to happen then is because our number variable here has a value of 10, when we call our test value and then add, let's say 5, you'll notice that when we refresh, you'll see the value we get is still 15. That's because inside of the test value, when we're calling our test value variable, we are inserting to it a parameter, and then that parameter is being assigned to our arrow functions parameter like so, and then it's doing our calculations or executing the expression. In this way, it's basically just saying 10 plus whatever our parameter is. In this case, it's 5. So then it's executing the arrow function as per normal, and then it's giving us an output. We can even change the parameter to, let's say, 10, and then we should give a value of 20, like so. All right. Now, the nice thing about an arrow function is we don't necessarily just have to have it as a single line. We can also have it as a multi-line, but then we need to have a body and then also a return inside of this arrow function. Now, one quick thing I just need to specify, if we create an arrow function in this sense, like so, right? When we're just creating a single line arrow function, we don't need to use the use of the keyword return like we would in a normal function. The reason being is that the expression itself is itself the return value. So it's going to execute the expression and it'll use that value that it then got and it'll assign it to the value where we are using the arrow function. But like I said, we can use a multi-line arrow function, and to do that, we need to specify the two curly braces to say that this is where the body of this arrow function will be. And then in here, we can do whatever we need to. Then we can have multiple lines of expressions to execute whenever this test value is being received or when we are trying to use this value. So to show you how this will work, we can quickly, let's say test, we'll take a number and we'll assign plus our test arrow, or I'm going to rename this to just here we go. And then to say that we are done with this specific one, we just need to enclose it with our semicolon, and then we can press enter. And then in here, we can technically have another line of code that we can then execute. we can actually assign this to a variable itself. So let's create a quick temporary one called temp value, and then assign it equal to that one, right? Then what I want to do is also say temp value, we'll multiply it with 2. And then we need to specify the return keyword in this sense. The reason for that is because we have multiple lines here that are executing, right? And for us to receive an actual value out of this arrow function, we need to specify which line it has to return. So then we use the keyword return and then specify what value we want to return back. So I'm going to say temp return temp value like so. So now let's just quickly see exactly how this is going to execute. So now we just need to quickly check exactly what's going to happen, right? So now we have a value of 10 with our number variable, right? And then what we're doing first is we created a temporary variable called the temp value, and then we are taking our value 10 and adding to it whatever we added inside of our parameters. So right now it's going to say 10 plus 10. And then it's going to multiply our return value that we have here, which will be 20, and it'll multiply it with 2. And then we'll get that value out, and then it'll be assigned to our test value variable here. So we should get a value of, I think it's 40. Right, here we go. So you'll see this is exactly how this arrow function will work. It first takes in a parameter. It then needs an expression to execute when the arrow function gets executed. So it can either be a single line or even a multi-line if you would like it to be. But then you just need to specify the body and also the keyword return if you're using a multi-line arrow function. And then it will return whatever we've done to our variable that we have assigned it to. And then we can use that value however we need to. Now, it's very important to remember that the arrow function doesn't necessarily always have to return a value. The only difference though is that because of the way we use the arrow function, it most likely will return a value every single time. But that depends on the exact use of what you're going to be doing. Usually when we do use the arrow function in this manner, like so, we will most of the time always return a value. So like I said, it's not always the case that we do return a specific value when we use the arrow function, but most of the time that is the case.
Thank you for watching. Want to learn more coding and programming tips? Check out our website, like and subscribe to our channel for more videos. Check you there.